And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to Nonprofit Problem Solver. This is the weekly live podcast sorting out problems for nonprofits. Today, we got Travis Johnson. We're going to be talking about why nonprofits should be thinking about and doing a podcast. But before we get into that, let me just remind folks that on LinkedIn, YouTube, or the Facebook group, Nonprofit Problem Solver, you can join in by dropping a question into the chat or a comment, and we will try and incorporate it into our conversation. If you're watching at a later point, you can also do that and tag myself or Travis, and we will also try and continue the conversation. Let me also thank my sponsor, YachtMe, the virtual events platform, which is 100% free to nonprofits, as well as remind folks that this is powered by PodPro Audio, making professional podcasting easy. So there we go with our full 1 minute introduction. How you doing, Travis?
I'm doing great, Kev. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Well, I remember, so it was the end of March. So episode 29, if you guys want to look it up, wherever you get your podcasts, or you can see it on my YouTube channel. Travis came on and told us all about generating recurring monthly income. And so that was a fun, really useful episode. And then we got talking afterwards because we both have podcasts. So tell us, Travis, a little bit about your podcast, so you can do your plug for it, and then we'll get into this issue about nonprofits themselves doing a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, Kev. We host the premier how-to show for nonprofits. We bring in experts from all different categories. You're having problems with your board, we've got episodes on that. You've been having problems with fundraising, hey, we have frameworks to help build that up to make it easy. You need recurring revenue. You want to worry about your marketing, your branding, or how to, I don't know, run a podcast. We have episodes for all of those things. And because my life's not all about me, if you go to nonprofitarchitect.org, there's also the Nonprofit Podcast Network, which Kev's also a member of. I got to remember that StreamYard is a
Right.
mirror.
Yeah.
It does not a mirror like Zoom is a mirror. So I got to point that way to get him over there. It's crazy. But the Nonprofit Podcast Network, we've got over a dozen shows to help you find the thing that you need to find to help you do nonprofit work better, because it's all in effect to help you build a stronger nonprofit.
So how many episodes have you done of Nonprofit Architect?
Oh shoot, 100 and like I don't know, 10 or so that are published, and we've got like 130 already recorded.
And how often do you release them?
We release a preview every Friday for the following week's Tuesday episode launch. I'm considering packaging a bunch together and doing one a day for like a month or 2 months, just to see, what that looks like and what kind of response that we get on something like that. But we currently do a weekly show.
Yeah,
We've hit
great.
top 6 in 6 countries and just have a blast doing it and giving you those actionable steps you need to get it done. Well, I see the live ticker moving, but I don't see Kev moving. So I don't know if you can see him and not me, or see me and not him. I couldn't tell you. Kev, you still there? Well, it looks like I'm doing this live by myself. So if you're listening into this live, hop in the chat. Let me know where you're from. I want to see, who's on board today, what questions you might have about podcasting. I know I get several questions like why podcasting is important or why podcasting should be a thing. And I went ahead and set up a guide, 15 reasons I think that everyone really needs a podcast. And as far as nonprofits go, they have other reasons. One is really getting your message out there, having your platform where you have the conversations that you want to talk about, whether you're trying to solve the homelessness problem, prevent veteran suicide, or even help local cats in your area get adopted, having a podcast is a way to get your message out there. Oh, hey, Kev.
All right, I'm back. Imagine that. Yeah, sorry, lost the connection there. But who better to leave podcast in capable hands than than you? So I just picked up that you're talking about animal rescue. Was that a kitten you were rescuing from a tree, or is that a podcast you were hosting suddenly?
Oh, it was a podcast I was talking about, how to get your message out there. One of those things in podcasting is really you have a platform to say what you need to say. And when it comes to nonprofit work, we always have to find what seems to be like other people's platforms to spread our message on. Why not have your own message, your own platform where you can talk about the things that you care about, educate your audience, and then have donors knocking on your door, having volunteers show up to help you just because they heard your podcast?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most powerful sort of generic reason to consider a podcast, because you can make that human connection with a wide range of different people,
Mhm.
and basically set the agenda, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. Like you sent me a message last week or 2 weeks ago. You're like, "Hey, Trav, you want to come in and talk about why nonprofits need podcasts?" I said, "Absolutely, I would love to. I'd love to come on and share your audience with a passion that you and I both share, how to get it done and how to do it best."
So, why do you think nonprofits resist the idea of podcasts? Because I mean, there are millions around of podcasts around every day. They're sort of ubiquitous. Do you think people are intimidated by the production of it, or the technology, or how it fits into their mission? What are the typical forms of resistance that you get when you talk to nonprofits about podcasting?
I get a lot of resistance talking to really anybody about podcasting. I mean, there's like this platform right here, StreamYard. Like, how am I going to record? Do I need a camera? Am I going to use StreamYard or Zoom or Riverside FM? Or am I going to like just record it on my camera and then use some kind of software? Like, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. So when
Yeah,
people get the idea that they maybe want to start a podcast, they're like, I have no idea what to do or where to start. Do I need to go like out and buy like all the fancy equipment to get the headphones and the mixer and all this crazy stuff? And the answer is you don't have to, right? The answer is you can start right now with something everyone has in their pocket, right? Some kind of smartphone, downloading the Anchor app for free, get someone on Fiverr to create you some graphics, or if you're already an established nonprofit, you have graphics, and just put whatever your nonprofit
yeah.
show is, that's your graphics. You can submit it on Anchor, before the end of this episode here, you can get it all set up for free. And people are like, well, I really don't have the time. Well, I mean, I do a weekly show. Do you think I sit down every week and do a weekly show? I know you do it live, Kev, but most people don't, right? Most people are
No,
like myself, and we pre-record interviews and content. So if you're doing a monthly show, you pick out something early in the month, a morning and afternoon, or maybe even evening, and you record all your episodes in one shot.
right.
Now, if
Yeah,
you have a
that's
production
what people
team,
do.
yeah, if you have a production team that does all that back end work for you, like I've got, and something that we offer as well, I just give my stuff to them, and every week it just shows up. It just self populates. They do all the work for me, so I just got to record it and make sure that they have the audio, the headshot, the bio, some of the stuff that they need, and they do all the work. So it doesn't take a lot of time once the episode's recorded to get this thing up and moving. And if you do something crazy like a daily show, you would pick a day in the week. You'd probably pre-record like 40 episodes because something happens and you don't have time to get out a new one, right? You want a lot of those in the can, as they call them,
Hmm.
episodes you already have recorded that you haven't published yet. So you'd pre-record like 40 of these and then pick the day of the week where you would record the 5 or the 7, depending on what daily means to you, episodes in a single day. So then you can spend the rest of the week putting these out. But if you do a weekly show, which I think is the minimum, at least once a week is the bare minimum, in my opinion. A monthly show, people are just waiting for new content. But you want to
Right.
have these and you want to set them up and get them done and then create yourself a production cycle to get these things out. Now, you can do it live, right? You can do what we're doing here and do it live. There's a guy named Russell Brunson. He's the co-founder of ClickFunnels,
Hmm.
makes millions and millions of dollars and helps other people make millions of dollars. He did a marketing podcast, got in his car, he had his phone, he hit record on whatever app, probably Anchor, which is not what I use, but it's free. So what the heck? Recorded it on his phone while driving to work. And when he got it parked, he hit published, and that was it. He went live, didn't do any cutting, didn't do any editing, and he just let it go. Well, his podcast has millions upon millions upon millions of downloads. So it doesn't have to be crazy expensive. It doesn't have to be this world-class production. It can be like what I do and what you do. It can be that good, right? But it doesn't have to be. That's not required in order to put together a podcast. So really, it's just figuring out the medium that you're going to use. Like me and Kev got the setup. Like I've got the ring light and I got the fancy camera and I got this stuff. But I didn't start with all this stuff. I started with what I had. And for most
Yeah.
of you, starting with what you already have it. You've already got a phones and a set of earphones or headphones. That's all you need to get started.
Yeah, when you got the headphones in, I was thinking like in Russell Brunson's case, often the sound quality from a car isn't great, but if you've got the headphones, that takes a lot of the noise out of
Mhm.
it. It cancels it as a use a very technical audio term, and yeah, you can get by with it, because that's, I think, perhaps the biggest learning, I think, with doing any sort of video or audio, is that you can only fix so much in post, and it's a lot of work if there's a lot to fix. And the best way to get a nice, smooth, easy workflow is to get the best lighting and sound that you can.
Mhm.
But sound is actually much more important. It's much better, particularly with podcasts, to have really good sound quality, which is easier to get right than lighting, which we're doing video because it's live and so on. But you're right, there are challenges with a live show. Sometimes the guests have had emergencies and we've not been able to broadcast. And
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago, I had my turn with COVID, and I could barely speak. Um, but I was fortunate enough that it landed in between, in a weekend between two Wednesday broadcasts. So that worked out okay for me. But yeah, it's clearly makes a lot of sense. I think the standard approach is to set aside a day, or at least half a day, and record as many episodes as possible, and then leave it to someone to cut up and present for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the way I do it. I mean, I'm full-time active duty Navy. I've got a podcast. I've got a family. There's a tons of different things that I do. I'm guest on a lot of shows. I go in and speak. I did the Veteran Podcast Awards. I got stuff. I got stuff. I did the Veteran Podcast Awards, and they sent me this sweet hammer. Yeah, look at this.
Wow, look
Oh
at
yeah,
that.
yeah, a little Thor hammer. It's nice and
Yeah, I was
heavy.
gonna say.
Uh, in case Asgard needs my help, I have a hammer waiting by. But I do that. I hosted a Miss Oklahoma pageant, earlier this year. It's like I did a wedding a couple of weeks ago. I've done all sorts of things. In order for me to get all of those things done, I have to have it on a schedule where I'm doing certain things.
Yeah.
And nonprofits will say something well, is it worth the time?
Well,
It
that's the
sounds like a
next
lot,
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
like a lot of work. Is it worth the time? We're already doing so many things. What you're not doing is you're not really marketing yourselves. Most of you profits, let's be honest, you're not doing any marketing. And then you're sitting in front of the computer trying to figure out what you're going to post on social media, and you've got to do this, that, and the other. And you're like, where does it all end? Well, when you do something like a podcast and you record it video and you strip the audio, if you use something like Zoom, I'm sure Streamer is the same thing. It has like an audio only file. You just take
Yeah.
that and you publish that for your podcast. And then you can do things like get the transcription and you can create a blog post, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can pull out chunks of audio using a program called Headliner. And if you
Yeah.
have 5 questions that you ask a guest and 5 answers, now you have 5 pieces of content throughout the week. So you're not trying to figure out what to post on social media. You already have it. You just have to repurpose what you've recorded. And now you have something to post each and every day of the week. So you don't have to figure out what the heck you're going to do.
Right. Right. No, I think that's the key question is it worth it? Is for all the things that you're doing, social media, and maybe you're going out networking at business breakfasts or chambers of commerce or whatever it is that you're doing, what is connecting to your audience the most? What is the most efficient way to reach the largest group of
Mhm.
people? The one thing you need to bear in mind, of course, with podcasts is it's typically one way. So you set the agenda, and maybe if you're having guests, you set the agenda, and there's a topic that you sort of project to your audience, which is obviously different than having a series of conversations. But it's not meant to replace that. It's meant to sort of encourage people to get in touch with you so that you can have those conversations.
Oh, absolutely. And when you do something like a podcast, I mean, it's not instant, right? Like I post tomorrow, I'm not going to have a million downloads by the end of the week, unless you have some
What?
gigantic, enormous established audience. But what it does is it builds this thing of content, right? Instead of having to convince everyone you talk to about what you do, what your purpose is, and why it should matter to them, you start creating this bank of episodes that talks about all of the things that you care about. So what happens is people that care about those things already, they're searching for them online and they find you. And all of a sudden, the donors are coming to you, the volunteers are coming to you, potential staff is coming to you because they want to know what you're doing. They're already bought in because they listened to the sound of your voice and they know, like, and trust you, and they're showing up at your door instead of having you to go find all of them. And it creates this audience. If you're in a small town of 1,500 people or even, 10,000 or less, do you have only access to 10,000 people? How do you get your message and your voice heard beyond that small town? Well, one of the ways to do this is create some kind of content like a podcast or a video show or what have you. And doing a podcast is a great way, especially if you have guests. I have guests. I know Kev has guests. When this is created, Kev is going to share it to his current audience, but he's going to get some little help from me because I'm going to share it to all of my
Right.
audience. Now, all of the people that in my audience, which is quite large, they have the opportunity to hear about what Kev is doing and what he has to show. Maybe they like my show. Maybe they like Kev's show. Maybe they listen to both shows. Or maybe they're like,
Yeah.
Travis, we haven't really liked what you had to say for a while, and we're switching over to Kev. Right. I mean, I don't assume that's going to happen. Right.
Right.
The people
We're
that can
not in
listen to
competition.
yeah, it's not a competition, right? There's not going to be like you only can listen to one or the other. But what you can do is you can start generating conversations with other nonprofits that do some of the same things. One of the big things that I found in my show, one of the reasons I started my show is nonprofits don't take a lot of time learning how to do the stuff.
Right.
Right. So in their office, when they're doing stuff, they can have in the background on the Nonprofit Architect podcast, and they can hear me interview an expert that tells them exactly how to solve the problem they're doing. And they might not be actively listening and they might be doing whatever. And they'd be like, hey, hold on, go back, turn that back. What did he just say? And you can use all the plug in internet devices like Siri, Alexa, or whatever you have to listen. And you can say, play the Nonprofit Architect podcast, and that can be playing in the background while you're doing chores, any of those things. But when you bring in other experts for you that deal with the same kind of problems that you're dealing with, you're going to find other ways to solve the problems that you're trying to solve with what you're doing right now. If you're doing a cat rescue and you interview someone in another city or another state that's doing this, they might say your fans might be like, yeah, where do I find a cat rescue in my area? Well, then you interview one, and now you've then gained their love and respect and admiration because you're sharing your platform with other people doing the same thing you are. It's not a competition. There's not
Right.
$10 out there that we're slicing up, and you get two, and he gets one, and they
Right.
get five. Right? There's just millions and millions and millions of dollars out there, but you have to be able to get your message out. But the more people you connect with, the more audiences you get access to, especially if you're in a small town or you as a person, you can only go to how many lunches during a week. I can go to Rotary Club on Fridays and Chamber of Commerce on Mondays. And I can find this other group on Wednesdays. Who'd you talk to? 120 people max? When you're doing a
Yeah.
podcast, you can get your message out to thousands, tens of thousands or more for every episode that you do, and you don't have to leave your office to get that message out there. You just have to publish it and find where you're allowed to post it on social media to get access to that audience. If you've got a cat lovers group out there, I don't know why we're talking about cats, but you got a cat lovers group on there and they have questions, and you can go in there and solve their question and say, try this, this, and this. And actually, I've done a podcast that talks about that. Would you like the link? You get permission to post the link, and now you have access to all the people in that group are like, oh, we've got someone in here that's providing us value that can answer our questions, and they have an amazing thing they're doing to help the things that we care and love about at the same time. We would love to support you. Now you've gained access to, I don't know, 600,000 people in that group that now have a clue of who you are and want to support you because you're doing great stuff. You can't find that at a Chamber of Commerce in your local area. Do they have a lot of good stuff? They do. Huge fan of Chamber of Commerce. But you only have access to how many people showed up for that lunch or that meeting.
And it's not like you are trying to get people who are they're scrolling past on a social media feed. You will obviously pull some folks in, but if you're, as you said, if you're talking to an audience of people who are already interested in that topic, then in a sense they're sort of warm to your content. I think this is pretty critical because I'm assuming that the second area of resistance after the technical point is, well, what am I going to talk about? What's the content? And I started, my first episode was a panel of experts, and then I shifted to the one-to-one because I could go more in depth into the particular
Mhm.
problem that person was bringing to the table. And so I found that more useful. And the audience said, yeah, there's a lot more detail there. So that's the way I've done it. So it's very simple for me. And you do the same thing to find someone to talk to. And then we allow the conversation to develop relatively naturally. But if you are a nonprofit and you're talking about, like, whether it's cat rescue or any sort of arts and culture or a human service nonprofit, say working with the homeless or so on, there are issues that you care about that are relevant to your area of work,
Mhm.
and so you've got to have some stance on those. You can talk about that if you just want to share content, but equally you can make it more interesting by adding additional voices, and it
Oh,
doesn't have to
absolutely.
be an
Mhm.
exclusively just us talking or our staff talking or just about us or exclusively interview. You can mix and match, can't you?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. There's like a solo hosted show where it's just a person talking about whatever things they're going to talk about. There's an interview show like we're doing right here. There's a panel like
Hmm.
Kevin mentioned where you could be interviewing 10 people. You get questions from the audience or you ask the people that you know, like, hey, what questions do you want answers to? And then you ask those questions to those people and they answered.
Yeah,
You can do a co-hosted show like the Kevin Trav show where we're talking about whatever. And sometimes we bring on a guest and sometimes we don't, but you can do a different style anytime you hop on if you want to. Like, hey, special guest host today, have Kev Kayak coming on, and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to bring on a guest and interview the guest too. But one of the greatest things that nonprofits have access to is elected officials. If you are trying to solve the homeless
hmm,
problem, there's people in your city, state, or elected federal officials that are also trying to solve the homeless problem, and you can bring them on your show and ask them what they're doing legislatively to help solve the homeless problem. You can ask them offline who the other players are in your area and you can gain access to those people. Now, when this comes up for a vote and they want to bring on an expert, who do they know that's an expert? Well, you're
right,
the expert. You interviewed them. They're going to bring you in front of Congress or city council or whatever it is, or going to the mayor's office because you're now the expert in their eyes on the problem that they're trying to solve. Plus, you have them
yeah,
on camera, saying they're gonna do certain things for you,
right,
which can be helpful too, right?
right.
But it's
But
just
I
a
think your point,
fantastic way to get access to these people because you're helping them share their platform on with your audience.
yeah, and I like what you were saying earlier about finding someone in another geography
Mhm.
that addresses similar problems, because then you can ask, well, what are the circumstances in your locality? So, we're out in the middle of nowhere in a small rural town, and we don't have these resources or amenities local to us. So these are the challenges that we face in dealing with this problem. Whereas, a cat rescue in a large metropolitan area has got different opportunities, but different challenges as well. Maybe there are a lot, just greater volume of cats to rescue, and or different issues. I'm not familiar enough with feline rescue to know in depth what the problems are, but
Yeah, yeah, I don't
um,
know a lot about feline rescue either, but there's so many ways to do this, and you're like, "Well, isn't there, like, so many other, podcasts out there?" If you saw early in April, we went over 2,000,000 published podcasts in the world. And you're like, "Isn't that a lot of people to compete against?" Well, really, most of them don't get past episode 15. The vast majority of them, 60 to 70%, don't publish 15 episodes, which means they might be out there and called podcasts, but they're not producing content. So you get to the end of the 15 episodes, and that viewer, that listener, they're done because there's nothing else to listen to. If you're actively producing week after week after week, they have a reason to come back. Plus, it's much less crowded than the blogging world. It's much less crowded than YouTube, and, audio is really more convenient. I can throw in the headphones anytime I'm commuting to work or I'm out for a jog or working at the gym while I'm running errands around town, or even if I'm just cleaning up around the house or the office doing chores, I can have a podcast on in the background playing while I'm doing all these things. So people don't have to set aside specific time to listen to you because it's just a little bit less active. It's more passive than actively watching
Hmm.
a video or actively reading. You can listen in the background when I'm doing my work and I'm working, like waiting to hop on here with Kev this morning. I had a podcast on in the background playing the whole time, feeding me podcasts and audiobooks, feeding me. So I'm getting smarter and better each and every day.
So, what would you recommend is the ideal length? So, if we've addressed the technical issues and ways of generating the content, how long should a particular episode be? And by the way, you also mentioned the frequency is minimum per week, and we talked about primarily
Mhm.
the production is a bulk session, doing lots of episodes all at once, and then having them prepared for later release, at least weekly. But how long should they be?
Well, there's no real rule on how long they should be, right? There's flash what are they called, flash briefings that you can get that are up to 2 minutes long. There's people that do 10 minutes or 15-minute podcasts. The average length I think right now on all podcasts is 39 minutes. But then you've got people like Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink that talk for hours about whatever their thing is. Really, it just depends on what does your audience want. It might be a quick, fast, down and dirty. I got a friend, Patrick Kirby, also in the nonprofit podcasting space, also can be found on Nonprofit Podcast Network. He does 15-minute episodes. I don't do 15-minute episodes. I don't want to have a guest on me personally that has an hour and a half of content and like, well, we got to 40 minutes, so I've got to cut you off, even though
Right.
we're vibing, even though we have a lot of information and a lot of chemistry. I don't want to cut you off. And I don't want to take a guest that has 10 minutes worth of content, try to stretch him out to 40 minutes. No one wants to hear that. So I do for my stuff is I get through the content we want to get through. And then depending on where the conversation goes, as long as it's interesting and active, that's how long my episodes are. But you're gonna have to find the right fit for you. Maybe you're like Travis, like we're way just too busy. We can't do longer than 20 minutes. Great. Do a 20-minute episode.
Yeah.
They're easy to record. They're quick. You can record 3 in an hour if you do it just right and everyone's on the same page. And you can get that content done. It's a lot quicker to edit if you want to do editing. And you can get that stuff out there and really help draw people into what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great. Then, all right. And I'm assuming I was going through these areas of resistance, but I'm sure you're going to through some others, and we'll get to some do's and don'ts shortly. Last thing in terms of resistance is if people start with their podcast, are they committed to doing it forever?
Well, they're
Can
they're
people
not.
take breaks? If you're going to do it
They're
week, you
not.
know what I mean?
Yeah. There's people that put out seasons. I know that there's a, like a high school doing a podcast. Well, they do 2 semesters a year, right? So you have a different crew running it each semester, and obviously
Hmm.
people know school's not in session over the summer, right? And
Right.
you've had other people that do quick seasons, or they do, what is it? They focus like a 3 or 4 episode batch around a single idea. Right,
Theme.
they
Yeah.
talk to I wanna talk to fundraisers this month, and they talk to 4 fundraisers back to back to back, and then they batch the next idea, whatever it's gonna be next month. There's no whatever you determine is gonna work best for you, that's what you do. But if you put out a weekly show and you say you're doing a weekly show, you had better put out a show every week. Because if you
Right.
say you're gonna do something and don't do it, all of a sudden people don't believe what you tell them you're gonna do, right? I don't recommend signing up for a daily show on day one, like, that's just astronomical. Can it be done? It
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
done. You're not gonna be getting a lot else done, but you can get it done. If you don't but this is something that when you do this, you build that authority, that credibility, and if you do an interview show, every person you interview makes you smarter.
Yeah. Oh,
You
absolutely. I've learned so much. And this is what 50, 58, I think, episode 58.
Yeah.
So come across so many good ideas, have so many rich conversations that it's certainly one of the most fun things I do every week.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, I keep doing this. Not only do I want to provide nonprofits real value and teach them how to do things, but I want to learn stuff. Like I've had Asha Curran from Giving Tuesday. I wanted to find out how she brought in $2.47 billion in a single day last year. I interviewed Steve Sims, who wrote The Art of Blue Fishing, and what he does to create world class events for Elton John and all sorts of different people. I brought on great leadership guys like Alan Stein Jr., who got to work with Kobe and LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. And how does that translate to the nonprofit world? I talked to Bob Berg, the author of the Go Giver series, which is just a
Yeah.
phenomenal book series. I had him on a couple of weeks ago, and it was just mind blowing. I would listen to his audiobook while I was riding my bicycle in the Middle East, 2 years ago, and here I am interviewing him in person now. And I've got a guy with the neighborhood kids here doing audiograms for me. And his goal right now is to be the nicest person in the world. That's his goal, which is a great goal. But I knew Bob Berg's episode was going to be in his inbox to create these things. So I went out and bought him the stack of the Go Giver series. There's like 4 books, and I gave them to him. And then he sent me a message. He's like, I'm sitting next to this guy's stack of books, and I'm learning directly from him, and I'm creating this thing. And then he's like, so the things that are in my head, I can put them out on paper or media or whatever, and that can feed into someone else's life. And, just him going through that transformation and that realization is, so worth everything that I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so last 10 minutes or so, I'd love to have you summarize in some respects. I know you've got a downloadable course on setting up a podcast that's still available. Is it?
I do have a guide. I'm creating a course
Yeah.
right now. It is going to be available at Forbes Business School at the University of Arizona here for the spring semester. Really excited about that. But I've got
Yeah,
the
that's fantastic.
ultimate and complete podcast guide. It's like $27 on my page, nonprofitarchitect.org. Go to the resources section, pick that up, take a look around. There's a freebie in there. Grab the freebie. See all the reasons I didn't cover why I think you should start a podcast. Whether you start it with me or not, it doesn't matter to me. But starting the podcast and getting your voice out there, building the connection with your audience, building that authority. When they know, like, and trust you, they're gonna start pouring into your life.
Right. So, what other do's and don'ts have we not covered? I know I tried to gallop through a number of areas of resistance that I know I hear nonprofits talking about when we talk about not just podcasting, but they relate in some respects to broader thought leadership or blogging and that sort of thing. Just getting out there. There's always some resistance to it, and some specific things around podcasts that we covered. What other sorts of do's and don'ts have you learned over the course of doing a podcast that you like to share with nonprofits?
So I made a lot of mistakes starting this, just like everybody does, right? I started with no audience. I wasn't really sure what the vision I was going to do is, and I just knew I had to get started. I started with a team right away. I wanted to sound professional up front. What some people worry about, and what I get asked a lot, is they worry about monetization. If your first words or first thoughts within the first 5 minutes about podcasting is monetization, don't start a podcast. Can you monetize up front? Can you monetize early? Absolutely, you can. If you've got a product or a service and you use this as kind of a marketing arm to draw people into what you're doing and you're selling your own stuff, it's going to monetize, right? That's fine. But if you're like, I've got to get ads and subscribers, the ads spend is pretty low, right?
Yeah.
You might get paid $18 per 1,000 downloads. So if it takes you 3 years to get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 downloads and you're banking on ads, you're not going to have a good time. It's going to be discouraging. You're not going to want to do it. Some other things that I get is people are like, well, I don't like myself on camera. I don't like the sound of my voice or whatever else. For the longest time, there's a little button in the bottom right-hand corner where you can just kind of minimize everything on your screen. I would do that when I was recording, and I would take, a card, and I've got some command hooks on the back of my laptop, and I put the card up there, and on the card, it's got some talking notes, right? And it's got a big arrow that says, look here. So I end up looking at the camera, right? If you're in Zoom, I learned to stack the Zoom so like the guest is on top. So when I look the guest in the eyes, I'm still looking relatively at the camera.
Right.
So I learned to do that. Some other don'ts is you got to get rid of like the distractions, right? Like you can't hear anything else going on right now. I've got the window open, which you might be able to see in the reflection, but the dogs aren't in here to alert me to anything going on in the cul-de-sac. So make sure you're in a quiet place. I had a guest tried to be a guest and he's in a coffee shop. I was like, man, you can't Like I can't
Yeah.
interview you because you can't fix that kind of sound quality if you're cared
Right.
about, a quality production. Also, don't jump in and buy a whole bunch of gear, right? I had like a Yeti that I had gotten from somebody a while ago, and I had my laptop
Which is a
camera. And
microphone.
yeah, yeah.
Just
It
for the
was
uninitiated.
yeah, a Blue Yeti microphone. You see them at like Best Buy or whatever for 60 or whatever dollars. I didn't upgrade my equipment to what I have now. I have a lot of fancy stuff until I was more than a year in, and I was sure that this was what I wanted to do. And I started making money on this thing. I didn't get myself in to that trap of like the expensive gym membership, right? If I
Right.
can't do 10 push-ups a day on my own for a month, then I shouldn't get into a gym membership. If I've never done anything, getting the gym membership's not going to make me do it. It's the same thing with podcasting. If you buy all the stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do it. But getting on and doing a Facebook Live every day, or getting on and booking yourself a podcast a day or a podcast a week to be a guest on, and knowing that you want to do it and get into it, then get the equipment, get the fancy stuff down the road. But you don't have to jump in with that huge financial commitment, because if it doesn't pan out in 3 weeks or you get tired of it, by the end of the year, you're just going to say, oh, this is a big waste and blah, 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 blah. You have to commit to, I think, in my personal opinion, no less than 25 episodes. If you do a weekly show, that's half a year, that's 6 months. And here's the deal. You're probably going to suck. And I say that not because you suck, right? I'm not saying that at all. How often do we try something and we're really good at it?
Right. Well, exactly.
First time out of the shoot, really good at it. Never. Like it never happens, right? And there's someone out there right now like, Travis, it totally happened to me. That's great. By and large, it never happens, right? You go out for the football team and you try to run a route as a wide receiver. You don't catch the ball. You don't even find the dang thing. You end up on your back before anything happened. You don't know what the heck you're doing. Same thing with swimming, riding a bike, driving a car. Any of that stuff.
When I started, it was January 2020. It was before COVID, and I was contacting different folks to be on a panel. I said, look, we're going to do a Zoom call with lots of people listening in who are going to be able to ask us questions. And then we're going to, if the audio is any good, we'll record it, and release it as a podcast. So like, yeah, sure, Kev. And then by the time we started in April, everyone was a Zoom expert because they'd done nothing else for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And so actually it was set up reasonably well, but it was like chairing a meeting because there were so many voices going on. And again, after that first series, the first 12 episodes, going to the one-to-ones was like a piece of cake because it was just having a single conversation rather than, people different, like putting their heads up. Oh, I can answer this one. I can answer this one. It was like looking everywhere on Zoom. It was a bit of a challenge.
Oh, I bet. And I started mine. I was deployed to the Middle East. I was in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and I started this in the summer of 2019. So it was before anyone was really a Zoom expert. And I started on Zoom for free, right? Well, then I found out that free Zoom runs out at 45 minutes. It's like it got cut off. And then I had to figure out if it was worth paying for the service and all this stuff and what this looks like. But like I had to do, like I did pre-interviews because I didn't know how to interview, right? So I did pre-interviews to get to know a person, build some rapport, and figure out what we're going to talk about. And then I would record an episode at another time. And I would have, my notes of all the stuff we already talked about. So I knew what to talk about on the show because I didn't know how to interview anybody. Right. But now in today's day and age, there's YouTube videos that show you how to set up Zoom, show you how to create a podcast, take you through Anchor and walk you through step by step of the 10 buttons you got to click to make sure you can start your show and how to get it on Apple and all of those things. It can seem daunting. It really can. But if you want to do something like this and take some other things like figuring out social media, take those off of your plate, you've got to create some content somehow. And having something like a podcast is great because like Kev's not doing any work right now, right? Kev is just asking me questions and it's my job to do all the work. When you host your own show, you just got to figure out what to ask. Hey, how did you get started? How did you get started? And they talk for 10 minutes and you didn't have to, you're just, chilling, sitting back, be like, yep, doing a great job,
Scribble the notes. It's like, Travis is great.
Yeah, Travis is great. Then you have, like, if you do a live and someone asks a question, you didn't have to even come up with the question. They asked the question. Oh, yeah, Travis, we got a question from the audience here. It looks like Jerry from Springfield, Illinois wants to know, where did you get that stuff in the background? whatever the thing is.
Right, right.
Hey, how do I get my own Thor hammer? Right? The guest does all the work. You don't have to do a lot of the work other than figuring out a couple of questions to ask. You can
Yeah,
coordinate
and
those ahead of time. You can have them talk about their expertise or whatever the thing is, or you can go and look at a couple of YouTube videos of like how to conduct an interview.
yeah, that's a good point. So I guess something I sort of taken for granted because I've done so many. I mean, even started in junior high school as a journalist, doing the student newspaper stuff. So I feel like it's a good point because it's probably something I've taken for granted. Final point as we wrap up here. To what extent have you found that nonprofit, say, let's an executive director, for example, maybe a program director, director of development interested in doing a podcast, has run up against some resistance with their board? When put another way, how important is it to have your board supporting this as an investment in time, in terms of the length of time it's going to take to build the audience, and there's not really much of an outlay, as you said, if you don't do the equipment and so on, but there is some cost involved, and there's clearly some time involved.
Mhm.
So what's the pitch to the board to get behind this idea of, say, a relatively small modest nonprofit in a, maybe in a, as we were talking earlier, in a less populous area, actually doing a podcast?
Really is how you pitch anything to your board, right? If I come in like, hey, it'd be a good idea if we did a podcast. What do you think? What kind of
Well, with
response
that
do
energy,
you expect to
Travis,
get?
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, right. If you come in and you say, like trying to figure, I'm struggling, I'm trying to figure out what to post every week on social media, and then because I'm spending so much time doing that, I'm not getting out into the community and talking to people, and due to A, B, and C, like I really don't have, I'm getting stressed out. I don't have time to do this stuff. And they're like, oh, so what do you want to do? It's like, well, really, I was looking at starting a podcast to help talk about some of the things that we're doing. And I know it sounds a little weird, but I've got a step-by-step guide shows me how to do it and set it up, and we don't have any upfront costs. Um, but this would allow me to create a content to connect with people on a larger scale, not just around the community here. And then from there, I just take little pieces of content out of what I've already created, and that becomes all my social media posts. So I no longer have to spend any time on that. Plus, the bigger this gets, the more people are just going to be finding us, and it works for our marketing. We can do less of that, or we can do this in addition to, and it really is going to be a good tool and a great way to get our name out there. And in fact, I can interview all of you to see why you're involved with this, and then we'll get that out there. And when people are looking for you, then they find us. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, and you can market the events. You can tell stories in an appropriate way about the work that you do, and so on and so forth.
Well,
Yeah, I think.
think about your big donors.
Yeah,
Hey, I would love, the CEO of whatever. Like, I would love to interview you and talk about you and your goals and possibly why you chose to support us. And now your donors are getting this extra benefit. Plus, if you have a handful of volunteers, you go, wait, why'd you decide to volunteer? What else is going on in your life? And you create these human stories about what it is that you do in your life. If you're helping people directly, you might be able to showcase their story of transformation.
yeah, excellent. Okay, I think we've covered a lot. Is there anything that you think that a nonprofit really needs to understand that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered just about the bulk of this thing. Like, if you have questions, right, go to nonprofitarchitect.org, find me on social media, and shoot me a question, or post right here on this thing and tag me in it, and I'll get back to you. Like, this is not as hard as we think it is. It's really easy to put together, depending on if you have a commute and you want to do it in your car. All of this stuff is possible, but none of it matters. None of the benefits that we're talking about matter if you never get started.
Right, right. At least have a crack at 15 episodes.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. So, Travis, you just reminded everyone it's nonprofitarchitect.org, and they can find you. Is there particular social media that you prefer?
I'm most active on Facebook. Like, if I get a friend request and I get a message, like it pops up on my phone and it's so easy to reply to. I love Facebook Messenger, or LinkedIn is probably the best two places to really interact with me.
And you have a Facebook group as well.
I do. So if you're a nonprofit and you're struggling and you're trying to get some answers, hop in the Nonprofit Architect Facebook community. There's links you can find it anywhere. If you look at groups on Facebook, search Nonprofit Architect, it'll pop up. Ask your questions in there. Talk to other nonprofit leaders that want solutions, or hop in the Nonprofit Problem Solver group I know Kev's got, and ask the question. If you don't ask the question, you can't possibly get the answer. Why not ask the experts directly?
Right. And I know that's something we both are passionate about and what we try to do every day. So thanks for coming on to my podcast with a second time. And I'm sure we'll come up with a reason for a third one in future, right?
Absolutely, Kev. Can't wait.
Wow,
We
it was
lost
weird.
Kev
It was
again.
like separate pauses there.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
obviously the internet gods are telling us that we've run out of time.
All
So
right, guys, wrap it up. Let's go.
so we'll draw it to a close. Thanks, everyone. We will be.
I'm sure Kev was going to say we're going to be back next week, same time, same channel. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being here.